guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing really well. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Emma and I am going to do quite a requested video, and it's a bit of a book review of the books that I've read over the last few weeks. Really, I needed to do it while they're fresh in my head, because obviously the more books you read, the more confusing it gets. So I just have a little pile of books. I'm actually cheating here. I've got 3 books that I haven't read recently. They're a series of books, but they deserve a shout out. And it's that time of year, we're all going on holiday, we're all looking for the perfect holiday read, aren't we? So I've got a bit of everything. There's a little bit of sort of Cornish love, there's a little bit of sort of thrillery whodunit, and there's fairies and there's witches and wizards. So I literally have got a bit of everything here. I'm going to start off with the first book that I read. I read this probably about 4 weeks ago, and it needs no explanation. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I've seen all the films, have not read the books. I have made a conscious effort that I am going to read all of the Harry Potters. So as you know, Harry Potter, this is the very first one. It's the book where he finds out that he's a wizard. I hope I haven't just completely ruined that plot for you all. I'm sure you all know who Harry Potter is. Goes off to Hogwarts for his first year at the Witches and Wizards School, Hogwarts. Meets all kinds of people, meets Dumbledore, the headmaster, and Hagrid, who is the groundskeeper, his friends Hermione and Ron, and it's just about their first year. He's an orphan, he's been living under the stairs at his uncle and auntie's house. They know he's a wizard, but they don't want him to know he's a wizard. And it's just about his first year at Hogwarts. It is absolutely brilliant. I think it's a little tiny bit different to the films. The Philosopher's Stone is probably the film I've seen the most because it's one of the more child-friendly films. We have watched, they've been putting them on ITV2 over the last few weeks, and we've watched The Philosopher's Stone, and we watched the one after that, which I can't remember what it is, Chamber of Secrets. And they're the only 2 really that I feel were suitable for my daughter, who's 8. And we've watched The Goblet of Fire. We've had to do it in 3 sittings because it's really long and we were tired and whatever. And it is really quite dark, and so she hasn't watched those. So obviously, with having an older son as well, when we watched Prisoner of Azkaban as well. I think she watched that one. And then they've gone a bit dark, haven't they? So I know The Philosopher's Stone quite well, the story, and there are quite a lot of different bits in this. And I was told that in the book, the character of Neville Longbottom actually plays a bigger part, and he does. There's a bit sort of towards the end where they play a game of wizard's chess, and he's quite prominent in that in the book, but he isn't in that part in the film. So I am going to read the rest of them. It's just so lovely to lose yourself in a world of witchcraft and wizardry, and it's a good one if you've got younger children. I don't know how much, Imogen, my daughter, is 8, and I don't know how much of it she would, I've got a hair on my lip. I don't know how much of it she would understand if she was just reading it, but because she's watched the film, I suppose reading it you can sort of visualise, can't you? But it absolutely dropped it on the floor. Then the next book I read, which you have seen me rave about in a video before, is Emma Carroll in Dark Linkwood. I picked this up in a charity shop. It was £1.59. It is the story of a little girl called Alice and her brother Theo. And Theo has to have a heart surgery. He's after a new heart. He's on the list for a transplant, and the story starts off with them getting the phone call that there's a heart available for Theo and going to the hospital. Her parents are divorced. It's written from Alice's point of view. I think she's about 13 in the book. It is a children's book, but it's totally suitable for us. So her parents are divorced. She hasn't seen her dad for a long time. She doesn't really have a great deal to do with him, but she needs somewhere to stay because they can only have one person staying at the hospital with Thea. So she ends up going and staying with her nana or grandma, who is her dad's mum, who she hasn't seen for about 10 years. And she's never been to her house, and she lives in a ramshackle old house, and behind the house is Linkwood. And alongside this story of Alice and her brother needing a heart transplant, there are letters that run throughout the book written by another little girl. So this story starts on the 11th of November, and then the first letter that you read from during the war, I think, is from the 11th of November, and then it goes to the 15th of November, and then the letter that you read from sort of 100 years before is, well, not 100 years, but 90 years before, is from that same date. And there are certain similarities between what's happening in Alice's life and what's happening in the life of this other child whose letters are being that you're sort of unfolding in the book. And then you find out that Linkwood isn't all that it appears, and there's magic in Linkwood, but her grandma wants to knock Linkwood down because it's so dark, and it means that she has to have a lights on in the house all day, and she wants to get rid of it. And it's the story of how Alice basically meets somebody in the woods, and together they try and stop Grandma from flattening Linkwood. But there's magic, and there's fairies, and there's wonder, and in the end you actually realise that 3 stories have been combined. It never feels at any point confusing. I never thought, I don't know what she's talking about. It's a lovely, lovely story. It's heartwarming. It's a really easy read. I read it in 2 sittings. I read it, a couple of hours. In fact, I started it on my birthday and read it for a couple of hours on my birthday night, and then read it for a couple of hours the next morning, and I was done. It is quite sort of big writing, but it's brilliant. And if you've got children who are sort of early teens, who are still innocent enough to potentially believe in the magic of fairies, then this would be a brilliant book for them, but also just a brilliant book for you. If you're sitting by the pool or sitting having a picnic and you just want to lose yourself in some magic for 5 minutes, then that is a brilliant book. And then I went on to read The Couple Next Door, which is by Shari Lapina, and I think this was a book that got given to me by somebody at work, and I have to say that I could not put this down. This is another book. I did this in about 3 days flat. It is about a couple. I've had to write their names down because I couldn't remember, because it's about 3 weeks ago that I read it, Anne and Marco. So the story predominantly starts with Anne and Marco, who've gone next door to their friends, well, to their neighbour's house for dinner, and their neighbours are called Cynthia and Graham. It's set in America. Anne and Marco have got a young baby, and they have got the baby monitor with them in the house because their babysitters let them down. They didn't want to not go round for dinner because it's Graham's birthday. So, and Cynthia, the neighbour, really doesn't like children and specifically asked that they didn't take the baby with them, hence why they got a babysitter. The babysitter can't come, she's poorly, or I think she's just been bereaved, so she can't come. So they end up agreeing to leave the baby at home and go next door, and then come back and keep checking on the baby every half an hour. And the story starts with Anne going back to check on the baby, and the baby's missing. And that's how the story is. And nobody knows what's happened to the baby. Nobody has witnessed anything. They have gone back every half hour and checked on the baby. So what happened in between times? Anne has had a drink, so has Marco. They can't really remember. Anne is also suffering with a bit of postnatal depression, but she's also suffered quite a lot with mental health in her past as well. So obviously the police are called, they think it's some sort of kidnap, they're waiting for phone calls from kidnappers for ransoms. It unfolds in a way that I didn't expect. It's quite shocking. I don't think it's a true story, but it's just one of those books where I had to carry on reading. I needed to know. I had to find out what had happened, why it happened, who done it. And it is really, really good. And if you are after a book that will absolutely grip you, then this is my must read this summer. The only thing I would say, because it features quite heavily a police officer, and he sounds like he's a little bit sort of Latino-y, American Latino-y character, and it reminded me slightly of, if any of you ever read Patricia Cornwell back in the day, I think we read them in the 90s. There was a Patricia Cornwell where she plays a detective called Scarpetta, I want to say. It's that kind of character, and it features, we don't ever know anything about their personal life, as in the police officer, but it isn't written from anybody's perspective. It's just a story about everything. It's just a narrator. But it reminded me a little bit of that kind of gritty, tense, dramatic story that Patricia Cornwell used to write. It's that kind of thing, and I absolutely bloody loved it. It was great. Now, between reading that and reading the next book, I started another book which I can't lay my hands on. I think it's in the kitchen, and it's called The Tent, the Bucket and Me. And I'm going to have to go and get it. Just bear with me, okay? So it's this one, The Tent, the Bucket and Me by Emma Kennedy. And my mum lent me this, and she said it's absolutely brilliant. And I've got to there with it, as in, I've not read very much of it. And it's basically my family's disastrous attempts to go camping in the 70s. And it is good and it is funny. But because I'd just read such a thrillery, chillery book, I felt like I wanted to read another one. So I kind of got that much of the way through and thought, I'm not really in the mood for this. I am enjoying it, but I'm wanting something a bit grittier. So I'm putting that on the back burner for now. And I will go back to it because I hate not finishing a book. So I will go back to it when I've read the book I'm currently reading. And the next book I read was a book called In a Cottage, in a Wood by Cass Green. And this is about a girl called Neve, who reminds me a little bit of sort of a Bridget Jones type character. She's unlucky in love. Disasters keep happening, she's split up with a boyfriend because she messed up and had a one-night stand, so they've split up. She's currently sleeping on her sister's sofa, and her sister's like this perfect housewife, married to this perfect man who has got 2 perfect children, and she always feels like she's not good enough, and she's always like, she's a bit of a loser, basically. And we meet Neve after her Christmas night out, and she's had her works night out. She's absolutely bladdered. She ends up having a one-night stand, then she ends up leaving him, like can't believe what she's done, basically running away from him in the centre of London, trying to find her way back to the train station, and she ends up on Waterloo Bridge, where she encounters a woman. And this woman looks deathly. She looks a bit like a ghost. She's stood in like a white dress, very sallow skin. The way she's described is quite ghostly looking. And she has an encounter with this woman, and this woman gives her an envelope, whispers something into her ear, and then this woman jumps off the bridge and kills herself. And the woman that jumps off the bridge and kills herself, we later find out, has bequeathed Neve a cottage. And it talks about deathbed gifts, and how lots of people on their deathbed, you can actually, it doesn't have to be in your will, it can almost be, you can decide there and then that I want you to have this. So she bequeaths the girl she meets on the bridge this deathbed gift of this cottage in a wood in Cornwall. So Neve, because she's not really got a great deal going on in her life in London, heads to the cottage without really knowing anything about the woman, anything about the cottage, not knowing what to expect when she gets there. And when she gets there, she soon realises that this cottage is not all it's cracked up to be. That it's a place where the woman who jumped off the bridge's name was Isabel, and it's a place where Isabel felt very unsafe. She felt like people were after her, she felt like she was in danger. The people around Isabel, the people that she meets, that Neve meets, the people that live in the village, all knew Isabel, and all agreed that she was a little bit nutty, that she'd had a bit of a troubled life, and that's why consequently she'd ended up killing herself. But Neve can't get it out of her head that there's more to the story than that, and she doesn't just believe that she was troubled and that nobody was out to get her, because everybody keeps saying it was all in her head, nobody was out to get her. The cottage has got bars on the windows, it's grim, it's really grim. But again, it's one of those stories where you have got to find out what the hell is going on. You've got to keep reading. This was again done in 2 or 3 days. It's just one of those, but when they say it's a real page turner, it really, really is. And there are a couple of times where I went, you know, and when you're reading a book and you have that kind of, reaction, you know, what brilliant writing. I don't know of anything else written by Cass Green. I'll probably do a Google and see, and the byline is, her dream home will become her worst nightmare. So absolutely fabulous. If you can get your hands on either of those two and you like a bit of a chiller thriller, then they're the books for you. Absolutely fantastic. So these 3 books, like I say, are not books that I've read recently. They are books I'm going to revisit again in the summer. Well, it's supposed to be the bloody summer now. But I just wanted to make you aware of them because I loved these books. They're by an author called Tesshain. I don't know if any of you ever have heard of her. She is basically she writes it sort of, is it autobiographical, where it's actually what happened to her. It's her true story. So Tess Hainsworth was a sort of quite a big deal. I'll show you that there. It's called Seagulls in the Attic, Making a New Life in Cornwall. So Tessa Hainsworth, the story starts, we meet her, she lives in London, she works for the body shop, she's quite high up in the body shop. She comes home from work one day, the kids should have had a non-uniform day, she didn't know, she sent them in their uniform because she's just so busy. They end up going down to Cornwall for a weekend, and she just basically, they have a bit of a heart-to-heart, her and her husband. They're both running around like lunatics, and they both say, is this as good as it gets? Basically, there's got to be more to life than this. So they make the decision there and then to up sticks, sell their house in London, quit her job. He's an actor, I think, and they move to Cornwall. I don't know which part it is. It's a made-up fictional place, but obviously it is a true story. And she gets it. It's basically their first sort of year in Cornwall, I think. Moving to Cornwall, getting to grips with the life, getting to grips with the language, trying to enter into what can be quite a closed group of people when you're moving into a new village, and they're seen as Londoners, and they're seen as, they just think they're second homers and they don't really take them seriously. It's very hard for them to integrate, but eventually they do integrate, and Tess starts working for the post office and becomes a post lady. And then the following two books, oh actually, I think that's the second one. That's the first one, Up with the Larks, Starting Again in Cornwall. So this is, I'm sorry, what a complete load of crap. This is the first one. And then that is the second one. And then the final one is Home to Roost. And if you enjoy books about Cornwall, or if you have ever hankered after chucking in the towel, moving down by the sea, these are the books to read. They're probably quite cheap now on Amazon and secondhand bookshops. I have to say, I've never seen them in a bookshop. They're all over the place when you're in St Ives, you know, you can get them. And I think actually we bought Home to Roost in St Ives. But they're just fabulous. They're escapism, they're funny. She talks about all the characters that she meets and the, you know, everything that's going on in their lives, and getting to grips with being a postwoman and waking up at 4 o'clock every morning and going out in all weathers. And they're just really, really good. And I think if it's her memoirs, the enchanting memoirs of a village postmistress in Cornwall, who would not want to read that? So they are my, I know I haven't read them recently, but I really think they're worth a shout out. So that's basically it. So they are my books. I will just quickly show you what I am currently reading, which is Virginia Woolf, To the Lighthouse. I had grand ideas of what this book would be like, because I know that it was written in St Ives, which is where my heart lives. I get it, but it's a struggle. The way that it's written, it's beautifully, beautifully written. It's basically about a family. It's talking about a family. They've got 8 children. She tells you all about the 8 children. Henry is the youngest son, and Henry, the following day, is desperate to go to the lighthouse. They want to go to the lighthouse and visit the family that live in the lighthouse. They want to take them. The mum is darning socks. I think their name's Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey. She's darning socks or knitting socks to take to the lighthouse, and they're making all kinds of things that they can take with them. And the father is a very proud sort of man, and doesn't seem to have a lot of time for, not a lot of affection, doesn't show a lot of affection towards his wife or his family, but that's just the way he is. And he keeps sort of saying, you won't go to the lighthouse because the weather's going to be too poor. But the son really wants to go to the lighthouse, and the mum is basically sort of thinking, why do you have to keep being so vile? Why do you have to keep saying that we're not going to the lighthouse? Because you're ruining his little dream that he thinks we're going to go to the lighthouse. And basically, I'm on page 67, and that's really all that's happened. And I can't really explain to you what else is happening. There are lots of different characters that we keep meeting, but we're meeting them, and then it'll go off and explore about them, and then you'll come back, but they'll still be in that same place. So time isn't really moving on. It's all happening on this day, the day before Henry wants to go to the lighthouse. But there's not a lot of dialogue in it, which I think is what makes it a difficult read. Because it'll say things like, I'm going to read you this excerpt. It says, she supposed it was all right leaving him to his own devices, Mrs. Ramsey said, wondering whether it was of any use sending down bulbs. Did they plant them? I know what that's about because I'm reading that page. But whereas another author would probably say, and then Mrs. Ramsey said, it was all right leaving him to his own devices. So there's kind of bits where you read it and you don't realise you're reading dialogue because there's no speech marks. It's just, it'll be like a big paragraph, and then it'll say what someone was thinking or what someone was saying, and you'll think, oh, I didn't realise that that was him saying that or that was her saying that. And it just wasn't, like it says, wasn't it late? She asked. They hadn't come home yet. But there's no speech marks there. So Oh, it's just a bit, I get it. It's just taking a while to read. It's taking a while for the language and the way that it's written to kind of, for my brain to work out what's sort of going on, if you know what I mean. And this Mrs. Ramsay, who's the main character, is supposed to be a bit of a beauty. But if you see her on the front, it's like the Phantom of the Opera. So if that's Mrs. Ramsay, and if that's what Virginia Woolf thought a beauty looked like, in fact, I can't even tell if that's Mrs. Ramsay or Mr. Ramsay or a ghost, or... Because then there's like another ghostly figure here, and I'm all very confused as to who they are and what they are. So maybe as I keep reading the book, it'll become clear. But like I say, I am going to carry on. I'm going to keep going with it. But I think I expected it to be, I don't know. I honestly don't know what I expected. It's very highbrow for me. For somebody who reads sort of like normal books. I'm not a highbrow reader, and the use of language in this book is it's a little bit difficult to read, and I think there probably would be a few people who would give up. I think if a book is quite difficult to read and you're not really understanding it, then people do tend to give up. But I think sometimes you do need to give them a chance, because eventually it does click the way that books are written. So I'm going to keep going with it, people, and see if my $1.99 was worth it or not. So that is it. So they are my book reviews for this time. When I'm reading more books, I will, I'll keep writing bits down about them. I'll keep coming back and telling you what I liked, what I didn't like. I'm going to get on with The Tenth, the Book to Me when I've finished Virginia Woolf, because I think I probably will need a little bit of light reading. I have a couple of books upstairs that I was bought for my birthday, which you will know if you saw what I got for my birthday video, and they are very easy reading. And I can't wait to read them when we go down to Cornwall. So that is it. So if you enjoyed this video, then please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And I will see you really soon in my next video. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon. Lots of love. Take care.